Hello and welcome to the fourth installment for this tutorial series. In this episode, we will be adding a debug feature to add items in our inventory without manually accessing and modifying our player data file. We will also be creating the item menu window dialog, which will be showing a particular item's information from the item list whenever an item is selected using the right mouse button. It will also contain the buttons for move and drop item functions. Let us now begin. Select the item list node to make it active. Then, on the inspector, uncheck the item list's line spacing property. Now, select the panel node to make it active. Then, add a child node of type window dialog. Then, rename the node to window dialog _ add item window. On the inspector, set the title to add item, position to 240 by 160, and size to 370 by 140. Now, while the window dialog add item window is still active, add a child node of type label. Then rename the label to add item window _ label _ item ID. Then on the inspector, set its text to item ID, its align property to right, vertical align to center, position to 125 by 40, and size to 54 by 14. Then, add another child node of type spin box, and rename it to add item window _ spin box _ item ID. On its inspector, change the following properties. Position to 185 by 34, size to 74 by 24, and under its range category, the property minimum, to 1. Now, add another child node of type button. Then rename the new button node to add item window _ button _ add item. On its inspector, set the following properties. Text to add, position to 80 by 90, size to 100 by 30. Then add another child button node. Now rename the new button node to add item window _ button _ close. On its inspector, set the following properties. Text to close, position to 200 by 90, and size to 100 by 30. Now, select the panel node to set it to active, and add another window dialog child node. Then rename the new window dialog to window dialog _ item menu. On the inspector, change its following properties. Position to 300 by 130, size to 280 by 240. Now, while the new window dialog node is highlighted and active, add a child node of type texture frame, and rename it to item menu _ texture frame _ icon. On the inspector, set its texture value to the default Godot icon from the resource folder. Now enable the expand property, and set the stretch mode to keep aspect centered. Then set the following remaining properties. Position to 110 by 10, and size to 48 by 48. Now add another child node of type rich text label, and rename it to item menu _ rich text label _ item info. Then, on the inspector, set its following properties: BB code to, enabled, position to, 10 by 70, and size to, 260 by 100. Now, still under the window dialog item menu, add a new child node of type, button. Rename the new button node to, item menu underscore button underscore move. Then on the inspector, set its following properties: text to, move, position to, 20 by 190, and size to, 100 by 30. Now, add another child node, button. Then rename it to, item menu underscore button underscore drop item. On the inspector, set its following properties: text to, drop, position to, 160 by 190, and size to, 100 by 30. Now, click and highlight the panel node to set it to active. Then add a child node of type, button. Rename the new button node to, button underscore add item. And finally, on the inspector, set its following properties: text to, add item, position to, 20 by 350, and size to 90 by 50. After you have finished with adding the new user interface elements, our node tree, from the scene panel, should look something similar to this. Now, open the global player script. Under the load data function, we will be creating a new function, which we will name as inventory underscore get empty slot. This function, when called, will return an integer value. The value returned will reference to an empty slot from the inventory, whenever it is available. The function will iterate throughout our available slots from the inventory, checking stored subkey, item ID, looking for an empty slot or an item ID value of 0. Once an empty slot has been identified, the function will then return the value of the slot variable. Now once the iteration has reached the end without an empty slot, the function will print a string, inventory is full, and return a value of -1. Now, after the inventory get empty slot function, we will create another function named inventory underscore add item. This function will require a parameter, item ID. Then, let's declare a variable named item data, and initialize it with a dictionary value by calling the global item database function, getItem, with a parameter of the item ID's past value. Now, we'll construct a condition where if the returned value of the item data is null, we will simply end the function by returning another null. Otherwise, we will then again construct a condition, checking if the returned value of the item data variable has a property, stackable, set to false. If so, we will declare a new variable, slot, which will hold an integer type of data by calling the inventory get empty slot function. Then we will check if the slot variable has a value which is less than 0, meaning our inventory is already full. If so, we will again terminate the function by calling return. If the value of the slot variable is greater than or equal to 0, we will set the dictionary variable inventory with a field equal to the value of the variable slot, to the following dictionary parameters, then finally calling return, to end the function. Now, if the property from the item data variable stackable is false, we then check if such an item already exists in the inventory. We do that by iterating through the available slots from the inventory using a for loop in range, from 0 to the value of the variable inventory max slots. Using a conditional statement, we will then compare the item ID inside the inventory's currently iterated slot, to the past parameter item ID. If both item IDs are equal, we would then set the current amount of such an item in the inventory, to itself plus 1, and then ending the function by calling return. Otherwise, if the current item to be added is stackable, and is non-existent from the inventory, we would again look for an empty slot from the inventory by calling inventory getEmpty slot function, and storing its returned value to a variable named slot. If the slot's value is less than 0, we terminate the function by calling return. If it is equal or greater than 0, we would then add the item to the inventory's available slot, with an initial amount of 1. On the script _player inventory, or simply player inventory script, we will be declaring and initializing some variables beforehand. The following set of variables will be nodes that are referenced from the window dialog _add item window node. The first variable of the set would be named add item window. Then, it will reference the node path of the window dialog _add item window initially. The second will be add item _spin box _item ID, and will reference the node path of the node add item window _spin box _item ID. Now the next set of variables will be nodes that are referenced from the window dialog _item menu node. The first variable for this set is item menu, and will reference the node path of the window dialog _item menu node. The second variable is item menu _texture frame _icon, and will reference the item menu _texture frame _icon node. The third variable is item menu _rich text label _item info, and will reference the item menu _rich text label _item info node. The fourth variable is item menu _button _move, and will reference the item menu _button _move node. And finally, the fifth variable is item menu _button _drop item, and will reference the item menu _button _drop item node. Now, let us create a new function named load _items. We will isolate the code blocks from the function on button load pressed, which we have previously created, that involves loading all the items from the player data to the player's inventory item list. In this way, we could reuse this function whenever needed. Then we replace by calling the newly created load items function instead. Now before I forget, on the script's ready function, we will change the item list property, set allow RMB select, to true. This will enable the item list to listen for right mouse button inputs, whenever an item is to be selected. We will use this input to show our item menu window dialog, while passing along the selected item's information. Now, on the node tree from the scene panel, we will add an event listener for the node button add item, and attach it to the default node from the scene. The listener will trigger whenever the button has been pressed. On its pressed function, we will call the window dialog function, pop-up, of our add item window. This function will show the add item window dialog node. Now, on the node tree, on our window dialog add item windows close button, we will add another button pressed event listener, and again attach it to the default node. On its newly generated function, we will then do the opposite of pop-up. We instead call the function hide. Now, for the add button, another pressed event listener, and for its generated function, we will call the global player function, inventory add item, and pass the following parameter. This parameter is referenced from the spin box's current value, which is a child node of the add item window node. Then we call the load items function. Back to the node tree, select the item list node to highlight and set it to active. Then add an event listener for whenever an item is clicked using the right mouse button. Connect it to the default node. Now, we will declare a variable, item data, and will store a dictionary, referenced from the selected item index from the item list. Then, another variable, str, item info, and initialized as an empty string. Now, the next line of code will position our item menu window dialog to our cursor's location. Then we will set the title of the window dialog to the item's name, referenced from its metadata, and stored to this function's variable, item data, based from the item list's selected item index. Now we will reference the texture frame icon's texture from the selected item from the item list. Now, the following codes will simply concatenate information derived from the item data dictionary, then stored to the previously created variable, str item info. We will also take advantage of the rich text labels capability to use tags and assign different colors for different types of information. This process is similar to HTML tags. You may want to pause the video, if you wish to copy the codes. Now, we will set the rich text label item info's displayed text to the finalized version of the value of str item info variable. Then, we will set the text property of the button, drop item, to the amount of the selected item from the inventory, and concatenate it to the string word, drop. And finally, we will show the window dialog item menu. Now, let us test our project to see the results. Now, forgive me if I will end this video here. On the next video we will code the functions for moving and dropping items from our inventory. Don't forget to leave a like if you think this video has been helpful, or if you have learned something from this series. Subscribe and turn on the bell notification icon for the latest updates. Leave your comments and suggestions below. Tell me if there is anything I must improve or if there's something you did not understand. Thank you and see you soon.